The feelings are that everyone wishes they could have seen Jesus while he was still here on earth. You'll see the nail mark, the nail hole in the foot. And then as you move up the legs, you're going to see the incredible amount of scourging that Christ went through. It's not a painting, it's not a char. They don't know how the image was put onto that linen cloth. It's unexplained and to date unexplainable. It's the life-sizeness of it. So for a while I had been stationed in France, just outside of Paris, in a town called Fontenay-aux-Roses, and there we had a small chapel dedicated to St. Rita, and in the basement of the chapel were meeting areas. Well, some of the meeting area had been given over to this exposition that we have here, and that's where I first really come into contact with the Shroud of Turin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Father Stephen Shadwell, and I'm the pastor here at Our Lady of the Magnificat Roman Catholic Church. The Shroud was considered important because of the image on it, and because it was something that actually belonged to him. The first reaction was that I'm actually looking at the face of the Son of God. And that really took me. In the Gospel of John, we find two mentions of the Shroud, basically, and that is the day of the crucifixion, Friday, Good Friday. Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate to remove the body from the cross for burial. We're told in the Gospels that the ladies are going back on Sunday morning, the day after the Sabbath is over, early in the morning when the sun is rising, to finish the preparations for the body of Christ. On Easter Sunday, Mary Magdalene runs to the apostles and says they've taken the body of Jesus and I don't know what they've done with it. And Peter and John, we're told, run to the tomb to see, to verify this report. And it says John peers into the tomb. He doesn't see the body of Jesus, but he mentions that he does see the shroud, the cloth, the linen cloth, folded, and the cloth that was over his face folded and put aside. So John notes in his gospel that the shroud and the cloth covering the face of Christ were left behind. The shroud begins to travel, and we have a travel history. The shroud is passing from hand to hand, from place to place. And then, of course, there is the inevitability, the tragedies. So the fire in Chambéry was probably the worst trial the shroud underwent. The shroud was folded up in a reliquary, a silver box, and in a niche in the wall of the church there. And when the fire occurred, it melted the silver, and that seeped down in through the shroud. So because the shroud was folded, those burn holes went completely through every part of the shroud. So the shroud literally has two lines of very fragile cloth because it was burned. So the preservation of the shroud begins right from the very start. The nuns undertook the care to patch it up and so that the cloth did not tear or rip or suffer further damage. And I'm not sure it was just them. I think there's some divine action here. Caring for this Redeemer, you can't care for Jesus physically anymore, but you care for his cloth. You care for the image of love laying down its life for us. They cared for the person of Christ the way a mother might care for her child. He discovers, after photographing the shroud, that it popped. All the details came out. The details that you can't see with the naked eye. And inadvertently, it began the scientific research into the shroud. It was now no longer just an object of veneration held by the Catholic Church to be the shroud of Jesus Christ. It became an object of serious scientific study. I think of that scientific investigation, what remains most important is not all the things they discovered, but that the shroud is unique, irrepeatable. It's not a painting. It's not a char. They don't know how the image was put onto that linen cloth. It's unexplained, and I would take away the fact that it is unique in all the world. There are no two shrouds. When you look at the image, you're going to start at the bottom of the feet of Christ. And what you'll notice is a large patch of blood on his right foot. That was probably the foot that was up against the cross. It seems, although it's not conclusive, but it seems that he was crucified with one foot over the other. You'll see the nail mark, the nail hole in the foot. And then as you move up the legs, you're going to see the incredible amount of scourging that Christ went through. And you can see the wound in the wrist, the nail hole in the wrist. You can only see it in one hand because they're folded over each other. And you would go from there to the wound in the side of Christ. You can see the blood flowing. As you move down, you would start with his face, noticing the bruising and noticing the crown of thorns in the forehead and noticing the serenity of the eyes. Then you'll go down to the chest and you'll see a lot more scourging. You'll see the wound on the side. And then you'll see the hands and the nail holes in the hands, the scourging on the front of the legs, and down to his feet where you see the nail hole again. On the back portion, you can also notice the two large like rubs on his shoulders. That's where he carried the cross beam there. And an interesting little detail, for some reason or other, and it speaks to the tenderness of Jesus, his mother, I think. His hair was pulled into a ponytail in the back. And I can only imagine Mary with the dead body of her son there, and not enough time to do anything, pulling the hair back and putting it into that ponytail. It's a rather large exhibit. I mean, it's a life size of the shroud, which is about 14 feet, and there are two of those images, and then a large blow up of the face of Jesus, two of the 3D split in half, and then 47 panels, individual panels that explain things like, well, the travel history, the travelogue, the scientific investigations, the fire that it was involved in, the fire in Turin, the fire in Chambéry. And then it takes the important parts of the image of the shroud of the body of Christ. What I would recommend is you come and you do the shroud, the panels first. And then when you look at the shroud, you'll have a much more profitable experience. I think deep in everyone's heart, there's a need for forgiveness. There's a need for life. There's a need for redemption. I can start again. I can survive whatever's thrown at me.